Um, My name is Edward Girardet with the Essential Edge and with the Media 21 and Global Journalism Network. I'm sorry, I missed the first presentations, but I found what the last gentleman was saying was absolutely fascinating. But I was just wondering, what do you suggest is the approach for a lot of the facts and figures and demonstrations you made are obviously self-evident in a sense. When you look at, I mean, it's as a, my daughter would say, duh, but how do you, what needs to be done to put this across to a nation? I mean, how do you, I suppose you have to convince the policymakers. I mean, there has to be actually a political decision made. And what is lacking? I mean, this information has been around for quite some time. I mean, you put it together very, very convincingly. It has been around for a long time, but how do you break this gap? And the second point is, we're talking about North, South, First World, Third World, whatever. I mean, is it really possible to talk about countries as being First World or Third World or North or South when you actually have whole segments of the population which are first? Yes, but I'm just wondering what impact does this have where you have, particularly in India, a whole group of people who are extremely well heeled? Does this actually filter down as far as policy making is concerned? Thank you.
Okay, can I take the question at the back? You have a question as well?
Yes, it's just linked to that. Shall I? Yeah. My name is Malini Mehra. Hi there. And I'm from India. I'm with the Center for Social Markets. I'm just following up, actually, to the question that Herbert has posed. And it's really to provide a bit more contextual information. Ashok, I entirely agree with so much of what you're saying. I appreciate the optimism that you're bringing, that actually we can go through a demographic transition in time and not reach 9 billion people by 2050. But there are issues that we have to deal with in terms of our effectiveness at dealing with the whole issue of why women not choose to, but have large families, have to have large families. I want to put a few issues on the table that haven't also been mentioned, and that is cultural preferences, especially male child preference. In India, I'm born and raised in Delhi. My father was a civil servant, and in the end, late 60s, early 70s, of course, we had the well-known, notorious family planning programs in which government officials were offered all sorts of incentives to only have 2 children, everything ranging from housing to education to healthcare, etc. And that worked partly. But what we didn't do, and we failed to do that, is strip out the cultural preference for males and the social devaluation of girl children. In Delhi, the capital city, we have the worst sex ratio in the country. We have still the practice of infanticide of female fetuses. We continue to have the neglect, the malnourishment of girl children, and we do not provide compulsory education for children, let alone girl children. This is in a context where for years we've had the government using all the media at its disposal to argue the case for why investment in girl children's education and health is beneficial for the country. The fact is it has not worked. And it's not working. And I think that we need to look very clearly at how we can get this message across, because it's continuing to have, have effects on generations. You mentioned your domestic help. Lakshmi, who works in my office in Delhi, is 36 years old. She's younger than I am. She has 6 girl children. She lives in a city, so it's not that she's subject to rural biases, and yet her mother-in-law made her have 6 children, girls, until she finally had a boy. She didn't have a boy, and after the 6th child, she said enough is enough, and finally her husband relented. This is the context in which we need really to look at new strategies.
Okay, let me take one more question, and then we'll have some responses before taking some more. There's a question here, second row.
Actually, it's not so much a question, but...
Do you want to identify yourself?
Sorry, I'm Nazir Sundarji from IC Volunteers. There have been a number of reasons given why women, families, people have lots of children. We haven't talked about health, medicine, improvement in... it's not like the third world countries are multiplying like rabbits. we're just not dying like flies anymore. Voilà, just a little statement for
Okay.
what it's worth.
That's quite provocative. Okay, so, what we're rapidly coming to in this session is that investment in girls, education and health is probably the best possible investment in managing climate change. I mean, I'm compressing a lot of different strands, and Mr. Girardet's daughter would go, duh. So the question is, if we knew this stuff 20 years ago, why isn't it happening? So let me start with you, Roger.
Well, I think the points have been well made about the cultural problems in India. And I don't know the answer to that, and Ashok will doubtless have a view. I do know that among the examples which have worked particularly well, of the 69 countries which have population stabilization policies, by far the best three are Thailand, Kerala, and Iran. Now, Iran is the surprising one. Recently. Yep, it was a decision made by the Ayatollahs extraordinarily in the late 1980s. They saw that the population was booming and that all pressure on the social services was increasing and that other problems were increasing as well. And it was time after the first oil shock, the second oil shock had worn off, so they were suffering from low oil prices to trigger their thinkings. So what happened was that the Iranians adopted exactly the same program as the Thais, by chance. But it's not difficult, except in certain cultures where clearly there are these very strong entrenched prejudices, where I do not know the answer. It could be in Africa there are similar prejudices, but it seems not. There are plenty of bright African women to prove it, who are well able to demonstrate the advantages to the family of having a successful African woman minister. The program consists of a clear government decision to commit resources for 10 years, the provision of good quality, well-staffed reproductive health care clinics free of charge across the country with universal coverage. The introduction of media education by all media, and again India has tried this, I know, to get women, as it were, to attend and get parents to get them to attend. Combination very often with child welfare clinics. So you take along your child for its 2 monthly checkup, and at the same time you get your 2 monthly jab or whatever. NGO support from the beginning, and major government propaganda about female empowerment. Now, this could be the point where India is the exception. I don't know.
Okay. Before I ask you, Ashok, to add to that, I mean, I'm wondering if that partly answers your question. I mean, in some ways, you're saying it's government leadership. It's real leadership, commitment of resources for a sustained period of time, backed up by a really effective communication effort with the engagement of civil society, but the key ingredient may be political leadership. Now, you may want to add to that, but I just want to pick up on two things you said. One, unless I misheard you, you said dense poverty overlaps with dense population. Now, that's not something that many African leaders would recognize. In fact, I've heard a number of African leaders saying, stop telling us that Africa is overpopulated. It isn't. We've got 900 million people. India's got 1.3 billion. Half the place is completely empty. All this stuff about population management is part of some kind of global plot. So that one isn't necessarily broadly accepted. But the other question I had is about the sequencing. In your Sri Lankan example, you're saying, look, this was a country as poor as any other country, but it took the decision to commit resources to do exactly what Roger is saying happened in Iran, political leadership, and that led to a reduction in fertility. But then you were also saying that actually access to light and education and livelihoods is the best way to bring about, what is the sequencing here? Is it, do you see what I'm trying to get at? So lots of questions for you to answer.
I think
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So can you repeat that with the microphone so we can pick it up?